Welcome to the first ever episode of What the Ref, our attempt at demystifying everybody's favourite national research assessment exercise. I'm Simon.
I'm Gemma.
And I'm James.
And I guess we better start off with the question, what the ref's this podcast all about?
This REF podcast is about demystifying all of the mechanisms that make up the Research Excellence Framework as it operates here in the UK. A lot of people might be surprised to hear that the UK's Research Excellence Framework is not only here in the UK. It is a UK innovation, but a research assessment framework is in operation in many different guises around the world in different contexts. So there's no escaping the REF. For myself as well, being part of I both study the REF, I investigate the REF, we now help formulate the REF, but at the same time, I'm also subject to the REF. And so it's always surprising to me when I go around and talk to people about what the REF is, to hear the different types of REF myths that are out there. Questions like, who is refable? What does refable mean? What is impact? People start talking to themselves in terms of stars. I'm 4-star impact. My paper is 4-star impact, 3-star impact, or that person's only 1-star impact. And yet they don't really understand what the REF is about. There's a lot of fear out there about what the REF is and what it means for individuals' careers, but there's not a little idea about what the actual ins and outs of the REF is. If we want researchers to use the REF in their own career ambitions, then they need to understand about what the REF is about. And so that is what the REF, this podcast being what the REF is about. So a way of trying to demystifying it and communicating the ins and outs and the mechanisms of REF and how it works and how it applies to people in a way that is accessible to those ones who aren't like me, REF junkies, because that's what I am. I'm a REF junkie. What about you, James?
Yeah, I'm not a REF junkie. I think that's fair to say. But, I think that's what this is about, right? It's about talking about things that are coming up, talking about things we're hearing, talking about, conversations we're having with colleagues in different parts of the sector and kind of feed that in. And, we're going to invite guests, right? And, we'll talk about that later, maybe who we might have on, but invite guests to have a chat. And I think calling it what the REF is meant to be playful, but also serious in the sense of, that's a question we hear a lot. Like, what is this about the REF? What is that about the REF? So just asking questions, having conversations, keeping up to date. That's what this podcast's about, right, Simon?
So for me, it's about the fact that the REF is this amazing driver of culture change within the research environment. And if we could get more people involved, if we can get more people to understand what it's about and understand how to take part in it and how to drive it, then I think we'll do incredible things for UK research. But it's impenetrable. It's so difficult to understand exactly what you need to do to be part of the REF, what it assesses, how that assessment is conducted, that it actually, I think, puts a lot of people off. Back when I started talking about the hidden REF originally, I took a look because I was very, very far from being a REF junkie. I didn't know anything about it. I started from scratch. And I went and I had a look on the website. I clicked together all the documents for the REF 2021 exercise, counted out how many words there were, and then worked out that if you were working from 9 to 5 on a normal working day, it would take 11 solid days of reading to be able to read your way through the guidance. That's just not going to happen. Most people certainly won't have the time for that, but they won't be engaged enough to actually go out and put that work in. So if we can get people interested and if we can explain some of those more difficult concepts in a more easy format, then I hope that we'll drive the REF forward and we'll drive forward UK research as well.
So you use the word impenetrable there, Simon. So what do people say when they talk about the REF? What reasons do they give for saying it's impenetrable? You've talked about the amount of guidance, but given the amount of money being given out through a REF exercise, then it's bound to have lots of guidance. So what are the other things people talk about when they say it's impenetrable?
I think it's to do with the interpretation of the guidelines is the big problem. So first of all, you've got to know what those guidelines are. And then you've got to know the people who are driving that forward within your institution. You've got to know the politics around that. You've got to know the way that the local institutions are interacting with the national assessment exercise and the way that is driven by people who are drawn from the universities in things like REF panels. So there's a lot of politics, there's a lot of interpretation to get through as well. And some of that is written down and is clear if you can find it. But other parts, you really only get to know if you're talking to the right people. And that's kind of what I was hoping we could do on this podcast, would be to bring the right people in so that other people can hear from them directly.
I think also within that, Simon, is the idea that the REF rules have changed, right? So from REF 2014, which is the first research excellence framework, not withstanding the RAs that came before it, different kettle of fish. But from the 2014 to the 2021 to now 2029, the rules change. And in the absence of any guidance that institutions have right now about who's involved, how to put their submissions together, what's going to be seen as competitive or not, there is a tendency to always adopt the rules as they were, like in 2021. And that's not the way in which the REF 2029 exercise is going to operate. And so this podcast is a way of not only talking about what the REF is conceptually, but really bringing out the ideas of what has changed and what it means for research institutes. So they don't have to do that 11 days of solid reading that you were talking about. Oh my God. Although 11 days of solid reading is kind of a dream for me, especially with REF documents. Sorry.
So we're basically taking Gemma's dream, we're going to read between the guidance, and we're going to try not to add to that big stack of guidance, right? This is meant to be, we're chatting, and this is, this could go a while, but we're meant to be quite snappy. We're trying to keep it simple, right? That's the idea.
Yeah, that's it, exactly.
Penetrable.
Penetrable. We're making the REF penetrable. If that's a word, then I think that's exactly what we're trying to do, yes. But snappy, easy to understand, and, just more accessible in general. So not just the guidelines, not just the boring, dry stuff, but also the things that are happening with the people and the politics around the entire exercise.
So you're saying we're going to be geeking out around the REF, eh, Simon?
Geeking out about the REF, yes, absolutely. So if this is going to be about getting the right kind of people along and interviewing them and talking to them about the REF, getting to understand what they know about the REF and sharing that with others, who would you like to talk to?
Ooh, who would I like to talk to? Well, obviously there's Rebecca Fairbairn, who's, in charge of the REF. She's the REF czar for 2029, and she's amazing as well. But, I'd really like to talk to Patrick Valance about the REF and what he sees as the REF. His experience with the REF, he was involved when he was on an RAE panel. And as we said, the REF rules change from 2014 to 2021 to 2029. And so I'd really like to talk to him about, what he has planned for the REF and what his experience was with the RAE and how he thinks that might have changed with the REF in light of the new rules and procedures, and what it means for UK science as well. And more importantly, what it means for UK scientists. I think that's really important in the workforce. What about you, James? Who's on your bucket list?
I don't have any names, but I'm really interested in talking to sort of, I guess, research managers, like people who kind of doing this day to day on the ground, the kind of connective tissue between the rules of the REF, the impenetrable things we talked about, the 11 days of work, and the kind of the researchers. Because going back to one of your points earlier, Gemma, it's like it does behove researchers to know enough, but there's not enough time in the day sometimes to quite know the things you need to know and the rules that changed this last time. So speaking to research managers, to hear the kind of, I guess anonymously, hear the kind of things they hear the kind of things people talk about, hear the questions they get. Because I think that's the really one of the really important factors here, which is there are loads of amazing professionals who are really trying to help people understand the exercise and trying not to freak them out at the same time. Like one of the roles of being a manager is to shield people from things they don't need to know or conversations that might sort of upset them or kind of put them off track. Because ultimately, good research should just be good research, and it shouldn't matter that the REF exists. But that kind of the research manager role is there to sort of just make sure people know enough to kind of sit within the boundaries so the work that they do kind of fits, right? So yeah, those kind of people really interest me.
For me, though, the thing I want to talk to some of the people who are usually outside the REF and that we would like to see inside the REF. So I want to hear from the technicians and the research software engineers and the data stewards and the research librarians and all of these groups who are contributing towards the REF, but who aren't typically recognized. Because obviously with the changing guidelines, their outputs can now be submitted into the REF. So how are they finding that? How easy are they going to find it? And it'd be amazing to talk to them throughout their journey. So we talk to them early on, and then we'll talk to them in a few years' time and see how things have gone. So that's the group that I'm really interested in.
I think the group I'm also interested in is what we call here at the university is the unit of assessment leads, or the unit of assessment directors or some sort of, and they're involved in putting together the entire submission for the unit of assessment. And for those ones whose people who are listening and don't understand what I mean about unit of assessment or UOA, it's basically the disciplinary home for a submission to go to. And it's a disciplinary home because they usually the rep has a panel of about, up to 40 different evaluators to evaluate all the outputs, which will be called contributions to knowledge and understanding, or CKU in 2029, or the impact case studies, which will be impact and engagement, which I'm assuming will be I and E, but that's a bit difficult. And most importantly, who will be assessing the people, culture, and environment statements, which in 2021 was called the environment statement, but now it's called PCE, which stands for people, culture, and environment. And so the unit of assessment leads are the people on the ground who are putting this together, who are running the reviews of all the outputs within their department, deciding which ones go in and which ones don't go in, and how they're balancing the expectations of what the university is telling them about what to put forward as a competitive CKU or output, or what is important for them to say in their PCE statement, etc., and how they're positioning themselves as preparing the submission, really doing the grunt work, the drafting, the rewriting, the coordination, the ego management on the department, because there's nothing worse than telling somebody who has an idea about, how important their research is to only tell them actually that impact case study is not refable. There's nothing worse than that. I'd really like to talk to the people on the ground, because I think that these are the people who are bearing the brunt of the ref decisions for submission about what goes in and what goes out, because they're fighting two masters. They're fighting the ref rules as dictated by the university of what the university wants to put forward as, their positioning, but at the same time, they're responsive to all the different academics who are producing the research and want their research to be, put forward, to be acknowledged, to be valuable. And they're balancing, they're making an assessment about how valuable these PCE statements, its impact case studies, or these outputs are, but at the same time trying to balance that with the expectations of the universities. They're the ones stuck in the middle. I'd love to talk to them.
And I guess the final point, connecting that together, I guess this wouldn't be something that's coming out of the hidden ref without it sort of focusing on the people who are kind of stuck between those things. Yeah. So you're talking about, units of assessment, right? Well, there's loads of people all around who are probably thinking, well, that thing I did that seemed like the right kind of path for my research, now I'm kind of worrying it doesn't quite fit, or the types of outputs that I'd like to produce that seem like the best form of output for my type of research. Is that am I getting squeezed a little bit when I'm talking about the ref, and that people are worried that it's not going to be, we don't know how to assess it, we don't know where to fit it. So those kinds of people as well, surfacing some of those. And it might well be that we kind of link back to our work in things like the hidden ref competition and find people we can talk to who feel like the kind of the archetypal researchers that don't fit, which is a kind of weird way of putting it, but you know what I mean? Those kind of people are really interesting to me as well, because there are plenty of researchers out there who kind of, they know the game, they know their work, they know how it fits, they kind of plow their furrow and they get on with it. And there's loads of really great, wonderful, interesting, innovative research that doesn't quite fit the way an exercise like this operates, which is kind of not surprising given that research exercises like this have to sort of define parameters and set panels and, put things in buckets, and everything we know about, buckets is that buckets don't fit everything, right? So
every time you draw a boundary, you upset somebody. Yeah. and the ref draws a lot of boundaries.
Yeah.
So I think, getting some of those people around those boundaries, that would be absolutely fascinating. And because, there's understanding the effects of the ref, and there's also building up an understanding so that we can affect the ref. There's finding these cases out, publicizing them enough, supporting them. So I really hope that we can have an effect on driving forward guidelines and practices within universities, as well as just talking about how they affect the community itself.
Yeah, and also dispelling myths. There are a huge amount of myths out there about what the ref is, and the worst ones are the ref is horrible for the career. It stops academic freedom. It basically normalizes creativity into a very disciplined about what is competitive and what is not. And when we really drill down into the middle of it, and we had an exercise here in my university not so long ago where we got people to put in all of their queries about the ref into a big hat, and then we pulled them out and addressed them one by one. And within that hat, there was this whole, no, we're not going to tell you what research to do. No, the ref doesn't, you won't be able to know if your paper is ranked by the ref by 4-star or 3-star. No, you can't use that on your promotion application. All of these sort of normal myths. And yet these myths are very prevalent. And really, when it comes down to it, there's a distinction between the ref as an instrument and the rules and the mechanisms and the processes that govern the ref, and how universities interpret and institutionalize the ref and press the ref and put their submissions together. And these things are totally different. They're totally distinct. And yet when there's a criticism about how the ref rules are operationalized on the university level, it's always seen as a failure of the ref. But the ref itself as an instrument is quite benign. The problem, perhaps, what we'll explore in creating these myths in the first place is how universities are operationalizing it, what they see as competitive, who they see as being competitive, putting their best foot forward and their perceptions about who will be performing well. And I think that's going to be a really interesting thing that we dive into, is these tensions between the ref as a rule book and how those rule books are operationalized on the university and unit of assessment level.
So what you're saying is, Gemma, we need a mailbag. Or a hat.
Oh, good. That would be great. Let's do that on this podcast. Get people to mail in questions that we can put into the hat, and we can, try to demystify it here. That'd be great.
We should absolutely take requests. I think that's like one of the key things that we could do. I like the idea of being. We could have a question time. We could challenge people to talk for 5 minutes without using a single abbreviation. We could do some things along those lines, and also have people suggest people that we should talk to. I think that would also be really interesting.
All right, then, Simon, here we go. Here's a test for you. What category types are there for contributions to knowledge and understanding as we know it in Ref 2029? And yes, you can also refer to Ref 2021 because the guidance is not yet complete. Go on. Let's say one. You say one, Simon, and then you say another, James, and we'll see who falters first. Let's go.
Okay. Well, so obviously we'll ignore publications, shall we? No. Let's go. I'll go for software.
Software. All right, James.
Artifact.
Oh, hard one. All right, Simon.
Patent application.
Okay, or patents. Yep.
Yeah, or patents.
Dataset. Cool.
Okay, we're going for musical composition.
Musical composition. Are you looking at them on the internet?
Not currently. I am counting my hand up because I know there are 21.
Can I just tell the listeners here that I actually don't know the entire list off by heart, and so I'm really just testing my colleagues here with a way of excluding myself from this competition.
Isn't the point of doing this, right, that we do run out of things quite quickly that we can think of, but we know there are more, and that's the kind of the sad truth that these are not sort of more embedded in our understanding that there is a variety of website. Interactive
website content, yes.
Website content.
Yeah. So I had a really interesting conversation today. I was talking to a university about going there and doing some training with them about sort of non-traditional outputs, as we currently call them. And I said, we'll use the outputs from our competitions. And I listed all of the ones that we have. And then I realized, I felt a bit bad. I was like, there's not really enough. There's not like hundreds of them. There's like tens of them. And then I looked at the ref outputs and I thought, we've got more than have been submitted to the ref. So we've got more non-traditional outputs submitted to the hidden ref than have been submitted to the ref itself. So kind of started off feeling bad and then felt quite good. I thought, our competition brought in more of these. So there isn't really a huge amount of them to work on. We're talking about in the last ref, there were 11 software outputs out of 186,000 outputs in total. So it's quite amazing that anybody remembers any of the list of categories that aren't related to publications. Let's make sure that changes. The beauty of something as arcane as the ref is that there's always something that you don't know. So whenever you're answering questions at after you've done a talk somewhere, somebody will always put their hand up and say, I think you're finding like section 3.2, and you can't possibly remember it all. So I think actually it's going to be quite useful to go through some of these guidelines just for ourselves and for our general understanding.
Actually, I'm going to hit back at you, Simon, with something that you said. The ref is actually not arcane. It is not the same. It is a completely dynamic exercise that changes from every iteration. So what we're seeing in Ref 2029 is the adoption of different criteria, different weighting of criteria, different approaches to evaluation, a big emphasis on including these non-traditional outputs in submissions that is coming from every level of the REF exercise. We're talking about different overarching panels that will be looking for different things and ensuring that the sub-panels and main panels, and we'll probably have a section on the sub-panels and main panels when it comes out, evaluate certain things fairly and robustly and consistently. So it's not an arcane thing. It actually is quite dynamic and quite changing. And so it should be. I mean, the REF is, in a way, an audit exercise of research, of government-funded, publicly funded research. And so it changes along with the norms and values of the society at the time. It's right to do. So it's not always the same thing. So I had to pull you on that, though, Simon. Sorry.
I think you can be agile and arcane at the same time. Certainly, arcane to people from outside research assessment, it can appear quite difficult to get into.
Okay, Simon, Gemma, thanks. That was great. We'll be aiming to put these out roughly on a monthly basis, so look out for us on your favourite podcast app. If you have questions for us to add to our mailbag, please send us a message at info@hidden-ref.org, and hopefully we'll have you with us next time.